Hello, this is astrologer Heather Rowan Robbins, and I'm talking to you today about this really unique pattern that many astrologers are talking about, the Barbault's basket, um, which we also call the sign of four, that is occurring the weekend of July 18th and 19th. But that's just the peak moment. This is a many years pattern, and I want to put this in context for you. It's a time of crisis with opportunity. And it's made up of a series of really encouraging and opening and stimulating aspects with one difficult Jupiter-Pluto opposition in the middle of it. So we're seeing a lot of changing of the people of people are leaving the planet, people are leaving jobs, jobs are transforming. What was working is no longer working. New things are coming online from about 2 years ago through next year. And let's break it down and take a look at this. It's not something to be afraid of, we do not think, but it is a time of intense change. And we cannot pretend that we're going back, whether it's climate change or trying to stuff the AI genie back in the bottle. We have to guide it rather than stuff it. And I think this is going to be an important process for the next few years, what we're looking at. This is now how I see astrology in general is not that the planets are making us do anything, but they're being affected by the same big universal patterns. And we can map them and notice the synchronicity that the patterns they're experiencing are patterns that are archetypally affecting our lives. And not just the metaphysics of it, though that starts there, but it talks about how those patterns manifest in our daily lives, in the technical things, in our relationships, in our metaphysics, and in the world politics. Now, from 2024 through this year, Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Jupiter, all the outer planets, change signs from inward yin, water, and earth signs, inward looking, to action oriented yang, fire, and air signs, creating a real shift on the world stage. Jupiter is the last to switch. It just changed signs a few weeks ago, and it is going to be at that Jupiter at that 4 degrees. Now, on July 19th, which is tomorrow, but whenever you hear this, um, four outer planets will be at between 4 and 5 degrees, setting up a resonance. Pluto takes normally 248 years around the zodiac. Neptune takes 165, Uranus 84, Saturn 29.5, and Jupiter 12. So they're all working on very different patterns. So to have them all change signs at once, and you can think of the signs like the filter that you're shining a light through on stage. It's shining through red or through green or through Aries or through Taurus. So the lights are shining through these bright lights. All the stars are shining their archetypes through these bright signs, these action oriented signs. Now, because they change their signs, they take very different time periods in each sign. To have them all hit that 4 degrees, between 4 and 5 degrees at the same time, is pretty intense. Now, tomorrow morning at 9:30 on the East Coast, on Sunday, the 19th, the moon will also hit that same degree and be 5 out of 6 points on a grand sextile. That means 5 out of 6 uh, points of forming a perfect sphere around us. Now, it's not that uncommon to have a grand sextile if you use all the inner planets, all the fast moving ones, but to have it on the outward signs, I have looked for that back hundreds, even thousands of years, and I cannot find another time that this has happened in written history. So uh, it is normally I like to look back and find what happened last time an aspect happened, so we have a precedent. There isn't one for this lineup, but we do have precedents for the individual patterns along the way. So let's break it down. Pluto, which takes that 248 years around the zodiac, which went into Capricorn in 2008, And it went from the sign of running, you know, it could be rebuilding foundations, but it's also the sign of structure and power and how we use power and how we misuse power. It can be the sign of the authoritarians, and it brought the dictators out of the woodwork. Now, the last time Pluto was in Capricorn was right before the American Revolution, when the English government was acting out so badly that America rebelled. Um, and it was in the last few degrees of Capricorn when we started the American Revolution. Now it's gone into Aquarius, where it was when we wrote our Constitution. So our Constitution's about to go through its first Pluto return in a few years. But it was back in the sign of Aquarius, which is, as each sign tends to be the cure for the extremes of the sign before, instead of that hierarchical structure of Capricorn. Think of a mountain goat trying to reach the top of a mountain, but not sure which mountain it is. It's a beautifully industrious aspect, but it depends on how clear, what's the point of that ambition. Aquarius is about how the group works together. How do we manage as a question? So the questions around our socialist democracy versus communism versus how do we work together as a group without labels in a way that's not oppressive, because that's the shadow side of Pluto and Aquarius, can be, the misuse of power, because any group is only as wise as the people involved. But we have Pluto now in Aquarius. Pluto had dipped into Aquarius earlier, then it went back into Capricorn for the last election, and then has been in Aquarius since January 2025. Neptune left Pisces, where it was from 2011 until this year. And Neptune is about our spirituality, wondering what is truth? And what is it? What's reality on a spiritual level? What's our imagination? What's our vision? What do we idealize and becomes what calls us? What do we dream about? So Neptune went from Pisces kind of deep in that interior world, which brought a lot of people to some form of spirituality or religion. Kind of it tended to feed into both spiritual searches of the unique personal level and for Christian nationalism, for believing in a belief without really examining the belief. And it can be the question of what is truth. It can be what is illusion and what is reality. What is the core truth and what is our dream? Because on a positive side, Neptune is our spirituality, our imagination, our creativity. Neptune in the middle is water, liquid, things that flow. And we've seen, while Neptune was in Pisces, a real call for a spiritual commitment to healthy waters, to the water walkers. Now, Neptune's negative side is illusion, delusion, escapism, poisoning, addiction, pollution, all that negative Neptune. So that's the kind of Neptunian continuum. It just went from Pisces into Aries, and it can be an addiction to conflict, because it talks about what we are addicted to. Now, what is war? But the positive side of Neptune and Aries can be leadership, entrepreneurial. What is real heroism in the face of the problems? But we're going to see more fires during the next 13 years. We've seen already that animals, there's more a feistiness even in the bears and the whales and the sharks and the orcas, that people tend to kind of go straight to armaments or to clear boundaries on a good day, armaments on a bad day. Last time Neptune went into Aries was the first day of the American Civil War. And it brought that feistiness for several years until we began to calm down. The first day of the American Civil War was the first day of Neptune in Aries. And now Mars is, because Mars rules the sign of Aries, it now disposes, which means that it is the planet in charge of the sign that both Neptune and Saturn are in. So Mars aspects are really resonating these days. Saturn entered Aries last Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2026, and it conjunct Neptune at 0 Aries on February 20th. We think Saturn and Neptune together, it's kind of a can be Weltschmerz. It can be a world weariness or a desire to manifest our spiritual practice, or it can mean a real restriction on Neptunian's positivity of compassion and connection. We have to really work with what that means. What that can we manifest it a vision and a dream, or are we stuck there? But the first strike on of the war on this Middle East began a week later, triggered by the Mars Uranus square, because you often see the faster moving aspects act like the trigger, but what it triggers depends on the fuel weighting in the bigger aspects behind that of the slower moving planets. So we began that new cycle, and so we have, Neptune is also our addiction to fossil fuels, to oils, liquids, things that flow. So it could be alcoholism in a personal chart, or it can mean a need for time out of time and space, a need for a spiritual life. It's where a positive spiritual life can overcome negative addictive cycles. It's spirits. And but here our addiction to fossil fuels fueled the illusions, the projections, the how hard it is to see clearly what's going on in the Mideast. Neptune calls for the philosophy of the individual. Pluto calls for the transformation through the collective. Pluto and Aquarius. Balancing these two will be key to the next few years. Uh, February 20th, we began that Saturn conjunct Neptune, which is a once every 36-year cycle. I said, remember, this big basket is made out of aspects that we do have precedence for. It's just that they weave together in this really unique pattern. And Saturn Neptune conjunctions tend to be major battles, political transitions, social unrest, and wild weather. Last time they conjunct, 1988 to 1989, they were also conjunct with Uranus, and in Capricorn, we saw the Berlin Wall fall. We saw the Exxon Valdez oil over water hitting a rock and breaking open. We saw so much political shifting during that time. Now, Uranus, the next planet down on this line after Neptune, takes 84 years around the zodiac. All the other planets spin in one direction. Venus spins very slowly backwards. Uranus spins backwards and almost sideways. They all tip like this. Uranus points towards the top of the sun. And I always think of Monty Python's phrase, and now for something completely different. We did not know this when it was named after the god of primordial chaos, but it's about that change and transformation. So Uranus talks about what brings change. Uranus dipped into Gemini last summer, July 7th to November 7th, 2025, but it now leaves Taurus, and which is where the last 8 years has been about what brings change has been the material world, money, stuff, land, the shifting of land, the giving away of land that belongs to the people here in America. And Uranus entered Gemini on April 25th. And this talks about now what brings about the change is how we communicate. And through technology or by finding subversive ways of getting the word out, it is like, how do we communicate more directly, more succinctly, pare it down, make it to the point, but get some real communication going here? And that also talks about technological changes, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Revolution to Jupiter enters Leo, just entered on June 29th, and it amps up our staging. Jupiter spends about 1 year in a sign, approximately, and Jupiter in Leo will bring panache, activism to the artwork and to politics, drama to world events. It just enlarges. It's bigger than all the other planets put together, 2.5 times the size of them. So it expands. And it in Leo, it's going to add extra melodrama. Now, this is already with the sun in a very active cycle. The sun is beginning to quiet down, but we've had aurora borealis cooking for 2 years now. And when the sun's volume is up, everything on Earth, it's like turning up the heat under popcorn. Everything gets larger scale, busier, the politics get wilder, and then when it sun quiets down, it's hard to get political change going. But we see a richness in our cultural life and in our personal life. But right now, it's still high rev, and these aspects have a lot of voltage flowing through them. So all these planets, they're going to be resonating with each other all through the summer. Some are moving backwards, some are moving forward, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But this is gives us a chance to pop in the clutch and shift into potential. But where this change goes has to be directed by each and every one of us. Now, you can look in your chart to see where you have 4 to 5 degrees of Aquarius, Aries, Gemini, and Leo, and think where with Pluto, where is the power shifting in your life? The Pluto. Neptune in Aries, where is there a fresh vision and a call for you to take action on your vision? Uranus at 4 Gemini. Where do you have 4 Gemini? What planets do these talk to? Where is change instigating? And Jupiter in Leo, where do you need to expand your world? Um, and that is going to be an important piece. I want to pop this chart up and take a look at it with you. This is going to be tomorrow morning, July 19th. We see Mars and Uranus together at the top of the chart. They're quite close. Mars has moved past. Um, we see Jupiter at 4 degrees, Neptune at 4 degrees, Moon at 4 degrees, Pluto at 4 degrees. They form a grand trine. This is sextile, 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 and sextile. A sextile is 1/6 of the way around the zodiac, and it's a buddy aspect. It's like Thelma and Louise or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the two planets that are working together. But working together, can also up their demands for us to change and grow. But they offer an opportunity. All those aspects open doors. They don't insist we jump through. Uh, the squares and oppositions tend to kick us out the stairs and make us grow. But the one opposition we have going through this, the moon tomorrow will be opposed Neptune. And again, brings back that question of what is truth? And ask us to really be discriminating and careful to filter and ask the tough questions, especially around information that comes to us that confirms our bias. That can be the hardest ones to notice there's a lie going on. So we need to question everything. And listen when it's real, but question everything. But that uh, Pluto opposed Jupiter enlarges Pluto. I think we're seeing a handful of important people leaving the planet during this time. With usually people who've had a long-term illness, but not always. I'm thinking of a really important astrologer from South Africa and Wales who just died, Ron Susskind, Lindsey Graham, who I may not be fond of, but played an important role in our society. Keep an eye out for who's leaving. But I've noticed that Jupiter Pluto, it's usually a freedom. When Jupiter's involved in a death chart, it is often a sense of freedom after a long feeling trapped or caught in either a disease or a situation. But Pluto opposed Jupiter occurs Pluto Jupiter aspects around every Ebola outbreak that I've been able to trace. And it often, we're seeing it in an outbreak of organisms, that challenge our health here, explosive diarrhea, how Pluto can you get here in America? Keep an eye on for those sudden explosions of events that are saying to us, why are you alive? Why are you here in the face of life and death? And that's a Pluto question, but it's not rhetorical. It really wants you to ask yourself that question and come up with a good answer. So we see those pieces working through. And we're going to see the beginning. This is the first. Uranus and Pluto are forming a trine in air signs. Uranus trine Pluto 5 times between now and May of 2028. Now, Uranus trine Pluto at times when there is unusual technological advances. It is when Uranus trine Pluto in 1810 and 1884, where it was where the cornerstone for the Statue of Liberty was put in place, the Washington Monument was built, the Prime Meridian established, 1921 in the Roaring Twenties, and it will do it again, form a trine in 2063. In general, we see Pluto-Uranus conjunction aspects, whether they're conjunct, trine, square, with the technological downloads. The Gutenberg Bible in 1455 was in the middle of a Uranus-Pluto conjunction long before we knew either planet existed. But it brought the first printing press. 1969, the American Revolution was stirring. It was really getting ready. The revolutionary ideas were happening, and the first steam engine, Watt's first steam engine, was built with a grand trine in Earth signs. Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. Now, think Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune, those same aspects are involved in what we call a little grand trine now. Why is it little grand trine? Because it's Uranus and Pluto forming a trine, and instead of Neptune being in that third corner, it's forming a sextile to both. So it's an equilateral triangle, but it's off to one side. So that's a similar aspect from similar pattern that we saw in those early days. And we have from there, Babbage's first differential calculator was the first computer in 1820 as Neptune and Uranus conjunct, and they both square Pluto. Same guys, same characters involved. The first gas-powered auto was produced by Mr. Benz in 1885 as Uranus trine Pluto. The first plane in 1903 was as Uranus opposed Pluto. First nuclear bomb, 1945, Uranus sextiled Pluto. This particular Uranus-Pluto cycle began as every cycle begins when the two planets conjunct, like a new moon, when the sun and moon conjunct. So this particular cycle began in the mid-60s when Uranus and Pluto conjunct. And those of us that remember the cultural upheaval, but you also saw the first mass-produced mini computer, the first dial-up connections, the first massive data storage. It's a landmark year in computing when at those conjunct. But we also saw huge change in social structure, in mores, cultural mores, and in how we structured our life. So many people deconstructed their reality with hallucinogens, and a few of them never quite reconstructed a new form. So it's a deconstructing aspect, but that can bring in new possibilities. But again, we see with this that it's impersonal. These aren't necessarily breakthroughs that are good for the humankind. How we use those breakthroughs is so important. I think we're going to look back in history at this lineup and see that this was the turning point in history for how AI affected our culture. And again, I think that's a genie we cannot put back in the bottle. The question is, how do we use it and how do we balance the needs of all animals and beings and life on Earth with the demands of the computers? I hear in Texas that they're one of the major AI centers. All the calves born in the fields around the AI computer centers have been stillborns and it went online. It's affecting us at a deeper level. We have to balance the needs of all the living organisms with that. Anyway, come back to this. That's going to be how we use these things are going to be key. So Uranus and Pluto squared 2012 to 2015. The first smart devices went on. Voice-activated helpers, Siri, Alexa, ride-hailing apps, streaming movies, cryptocurrency, self-driving cars, and the first deep fakes, digitally altered images, bringing up the question of what is real. Uh, so we're going to see this whole process continue. What do we do with this technology? Pluto and Uranus trined a few years before the American Revolution during the Boston Tea Party in 1773. Um, these two planets were squared when Obama came in office from 2009 to 2017, and the Right to Marry Act was smack dab in the middle of a Uranus and Pluto square that was uncomfortable for some people, great relief for others, that it put the clutch in and brought a huge shift in a gear that was ready to go. And so, but you see that trine, we mentioned that small grand square, the small uh, uh, this small grand trine with Neptune. I think of this like Neptune holding the reins on these, with the two planets trine and Neptune in the middle, sextile them both. And I think, what does it mean that Neptune is going to be holding the reins? The right to vision, the right to say what we're doing with this, I think is going to be a key part of the process. So, how do we vision it? Are we looking for truth? Are we looking for illusion that can be temporary respite? When we think of the nature of Neptunian addiction, it's looking for the answer in the wrong place. That's my definition of addiction. Because if you're looking for the answer in the wrong place, then we never get what we're looking for. We may need more and more and more and more and more. I think, and it never feels satisfied. And what does that cause in the rest of life? So we have to look, what are we actually searching for? How can Neptune give us the vision of what we're looking for, really looking for, and not the illusion of what we're looking for? So we're going to see this cycle continuing over and over again. Uh, Now, what's interesting to me, um, when we see we've got all of these aspects cooking, with the lineup of the grand trine, all these planets talking together, offering the opportunity for evolution. And again, I ask you to look in your chart. Where are these aspects happening? How can you participate in this? How can you prevent, not look to how do you hold on to the past, but bring into the future what is valuable from the past? Look to the past for compost, but we need to be willing to recreate our world. So we work with this, and on the other side of this, I look at the degrees of each of these signs. Now, when we're looking at what's called Sabian symbols, which are the degree that a planet is in and that it adds a flavor, out of 360 degrees around the zodiac, each degree has a Sabian symbol, an image, an archetype that goes with it, channeled by a group of people, various different approaches. But I look at, I collect them, and that gives us a unique image for what that degree means. We use the when it's past if it's past 4 degrees, if it's 4 and 4 degrees and 3 minutes, we're going to look to 5 degrees. Anything between 4 and 5 would be read as 5 degrees by the Sabian symbols. So Pluto will be at 5 degrees of Aquarius, and the image for that is a council of ancestors, that we get to talk to our ancestors, our cultural ancestors, our personal ancestors, and ask for wisdom from the past to bring wisdom into the future and help it transform in a good way. For 5 Leo, which is where Jupiter is, the expansion is the image is a rock formation at the edge of a precipice. Now, this can go is it the rock falling over, or is it a place that we can mark and hold onto so we don't fall over the precipice? Think about that. Where is there a rock that you can count on being solid for you as you look into the future, into the fact that things may be about to change radically, environmentally, politically, and again, it won't be necessarily overnight. These are not aspects that cause huge earthquakes. These are that seed transformation. And so when we look back at this time, we will see how this time was pivotal in the evolution, change, transformation, uh, any real in huge shifts. But whether those shifts are positive transformation, whether they're evolution or they are destruction, that will be up to us. So watch those, kind of keep that, see how you can work to support the possibilities. 5 Aries, where Neptune will be. The image, it's a triangle with wings. The ability to rise above the ordinary and integrate the concrete and the spiritual. And I love that. That image of Neptune is asking us to have wings with our imagination, to vision where we could go with this, and to rise above the ordinary, but bring that vision back and integrate it into our practical lives. That our spiritual life and our sense of true compassion, our feeling at one with all sentient beings, and our daily actions need to work together. The image for Uranus, the point of change, is 5 Gemini, and the symbol for that is a radical magazine. And the image of for the description of that is to challenge the status quo through communication, the role of the mind in social evolution, the importance of disseminating ideas to mobilize action and reform. How can social media, how can new forms of communication that are just going to be coming online look for ways beyond Facebook and TikTok and Instagram for people to really connect in a solid way and really find one each other and share their truths to help move forward. And if it hasn't been invented yet, someone work on that. 5 Libra, where the moon will be tomorrow morning, is a man teaching the true inner knowledge of the new world to his students. That's as our feelings, our relationships, our heart, wherever you have 5 Libra, will help you know where do you need to teach, where do you need to speak, and to listen to the wise and to hear that wisdom and speak, help support the search for wisdom around you. Now there's an empty corner. You've got 5 out of 6. So what's the missing corner? Because often the missing corner is like a convex mirror. It's all focusing on this extra point. And we have to bring that in somehow. We want wholeness in our chart, if there's a point missing or a part missing, that usually gets activated by the people that we bring into our lives or the experience we have in our lives to help us round out. Because rounding is the concept of evolution, not necessarily specific progress. So that empty corner, 5 degrees, is an old owl up in a tree. And one description of this is the symbol represents the necessary element of steadiness in human affairs and emphasizes the importance of self respect and normalcy in life. That we should be willing to process our lessons from mistakes and struggles, but also uh, see how we can bring that steadiness to that saying to you to live your daily life in the healthiest way you can, but that heartbeat of normalcy will help us all stay grounded enough to guide these transformative aspects and to use them in our life. So chop wood, carry water, be good to one another, and keep eyes for how to participate in these evolutionary aspects. And I wish you well on this. And I hope that your transformative time is powerful and that you can take this into the future uh, with, uh, with glee, power, evolution, and help us turn this world around.